Welcome. Hello, y'all. It's afternoon here, but you know, if you're in another time zone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, and welcome to another Instagram live session. I'm so excited to talk to you guys because, per usual, we have an incredible guest. Today we're going to be talking to Miss USA 2016, Deshauna Barber. So you guys may know that we did a live together, I don't know, I guess a couple weeks ago. But we talked about so many things. We got so many questions from you guys. And we like the live, the hour went by so quickly. And so we talked on the live about whether or not we should do another one immediately following. And you guys wanted it. And so here we are. We're going to do another live with me and Deshauna, finish our conversation that we were having before, because there were a lot of questions we didn't get to. And a lot of topics that need to be discussed, especially considering the current climate. You know, we've talked about Black Lives Matter. We've talked about police brutality. Tomorrow is JuneTeenth, so we're going to talk a little bit about JuneTeenth, its importance, what we do to celebrate, and you guys can do, you know, how you can learn about what's going on right now. So it's an incredible moment that we're in right now, and I'm glad to have our guest, Deshauna. Welcome.
Hello.
Or I should say, welcome back.
Welcome back. I'm so happy to be back. I'm glad we went through and scheduled. I'm trying to get my lighting together. Okay, it's a little bit better.
You're glowing per usual, Queen.
Thank you. I bought this thing. I bought this like little light at Target.
I love it.
I felt like it was kind of dark last time, so I'm like, okay, how do I get my lighting?
I was gonna say I have mine too. Even though I'm sitting right in front of a window, it always just does a really good job of like filling in the rest. Of your face.
A nice clean look. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Oh my gosh, Olivia's watching. So Olivia Jordan.
Hi, Olivia.
We adore you too, Olivia. Thanks for tuning in. So I was telling everybody, you know, that our last live got cut short and that we wanted to do another one to sort of finish what we were talking about and also talk about what's happening now. Because, you know, a lot of people are talking about Black Lives Matter, the current unrest, and the renewed unrest because of the shooting and murder of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta. So what do you think about, you know, what's happened so far and people, you know, the continued outrage that's happened?
I think I have so many thoughts on it. And personally, I know that right now everyone's feeling like the drainage of it all. That, you know, you think you get 5 steps forward and then a week later someone else unarmed is killed. And it's like, you know, what do you do to be able to combat this high and low of the movement in itself? And I think that right now, Rayshard Brooks in particular, I spoke about him on my Instagram story yesterday. And this narrative that I talked about, which is this comfort that we have with seeing police officers kill unarmed people, that in itself is disturbing. It's something that really is only normalized in the United States where we're used to it. So anytime it happens, we naturally pick it apart to see if it's okay. When in fact, in most countries, it's very rare that police officers kill anyone, whether armed or unarmed. So I find the Rayshard Brooks situation very unique in itself because, you know, there were so many things that happened, especially being the fact that everyone says, well, he ran, he resisted arrest, he was trying to flee the scene of a crime, he might have been drinking, all these things. And we have to really lock in the fact that all those things are so irrelevant. And it's irrelevant because of the fact that we can never be comfortable with officers not utilizing every option possible first before lethal force. And I think that's where we go wrong. We're so comfortable with seeing guilty people killed. And I'm not saying that he was guilty, but I'm saying that there were some laws broken. Obviously, we all know this. But even the moment of laws being broken, police officers still aren't supposed to kill guilty people.
Right. Well, I think there was something that Trevor Noah posted the other day, because I don't even think it's just about guilty people. I think it's about us constantly excusing the behavior of police officers, even when they're wrong. And it happens to be that we're making those excuses, especially when it relates to incidents involving Black people. And so Trevor Noah was talking about, he was like, well, you're always saying, you know, maybe if he wasn't drunk, maybe if he didn't grab his taser, maybe if he didn't run, maybe if Breonna Taylor wasn't sleeping in her home. Like maybe if Eric Garner wasn't selling cigarettes, there's all these constant excuses for bad behavior on the part of police officers. And it's unfortunately not often that we see people just openly condemning behavior. Police officers and people who aren't police officers condemning the behavior of police officers who have committed wrongs.
Right. Exactly. And I actually saw that episode. I love Trevor Noah because there's a way that he's able to break down things where everyone understands it. And I loved what he said because, we really need to take out the what ifs of the conversation and just go back to the fact of, was lethal force necessary? And in this moment, and in most moments, it's not when the person is unarmed. It's not. There are ways that we have to require the police force to de-escalate these situations. What was happening to de-escalate it? Just because someone is running away doesn't automatically condemn them to a death sentence. Because someone is running does not mean they deserve to be shot in the back. And, I see all the comments and I hear you, kind of, I hear you. Well,
it's not even all the comments. I think I think most people are sort of recognizing what we're talking about. I think there's one person on here, it looks like Summers_mom22, who says, guilty, he was drunk, plus he just got out of jail for beating his kids. And I think number one, like Deshauna was saying, guilty or not of a specific crime, if we're talking about being drunk, in the United States of America, being drunk is not a death sentence. You don't get to go to jail. Like that's not the result that should happen just because you're drunk in public or sleeping in your car because you've passed out from being drunk or whatever. I mean, I don't know whether he was or not, but that's not a crime that deserves capital punishment, number one. And number two, even if it was, our justice system requires that you have your chance in court, that you get to present information and evidence, you get an attorney on your side that gets to fight for you. And what we're saying is Black people never get that chance, that instead of us being able to go to court and prove our innocence, too often we are murdered by police unnecessarily in the streets. And so Summer's mom, I have to say, I disagree with you. And that is exactly why. So I think that there needs to be more people who are understanding and looking at the facts and recognizing what's happening.
Right. I completely agree. And like one Lisa Marie just said, due process. When is it okay? And everyone needs to take a step back and think about the mistakes that we all have made. We need to think about the moments where we may have broken the law. We need to think about all these moments and be transparent with ourselves. And all of us have in back of our minds that if, in fact, there's something that I do, a family member does, a friend does, we expect them to have their chance in court. We expect them to be able to pay for lawyers and assist them in any way, shape, or form. We have this expectation. That's why we live in the land of the free. That's why we live in America, where you get the opportunity to have an option to plead your case and be able to face justice, be able to face your sentence, be able to have your moment, and a judge and a jury. That's their job. It is not the job of a police officer to be able to determine whether or not you are guilty or not guilty, to be able to decide whether or not you get a death sentence. That's not their responsibility. And I talk about this a lot when it comes to soldiers. Being a soldier myself, being in a relationship with a soldier he's off training right now. We have in our minds the focus on not being lethal. We have our rules of engagement in the military where you are required to go through a list of things before you can pull the trigger. That is a requirement by the military. And when we go overseas, even in a war zone, we are required to go through those lists, no matter how scared, no matter how afraid, no matter how bad things are. If we don't go through that list of rules of engagement, we cannot pull the trigger. And if we do, we go to jail and we face the military justice system. Police officers, as of right now, most don't have a rules of engagement. As long as they can say that I feared for my life, they are allowed to use lethal force. And I think that that's one of those things that needs to be transitioned and transformed within police reform bills and things along those lines, is requiring a list of things that you must do before you can pull the trigger, before you can use lethal force. It can't just be based on I fear for my life, because if you have someone that has implicit bias, if you have someone that has a racism within their hearts, they're just going to say, well, feel for my life, bop, 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 bop. And there
Exactly.
is no level of checklist when it comes to being able to pull the trigger. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I find so frustrating as a soldier, that someone that's trained to use weapons, someone that's supposed to be protecting and serving against the bad guys, I find it so frustrating that you can literally just say, I fear for my life. And that's the only requirement that you have before you take the life of another individual. And I don't understand that. And I'm hoping that in this police reform bill and some of the things that's being passed in Congress, that there is some level of accountability before these sort of actions are taken. And that's kind of just my thinking. So I'm just kind of rambling, but that's my thinking.
Well, no, I agree. And Nia Sanchez is also on. She says, I just had a long conversation with my dad about his military training. He's so mad at what's happening by officers here. So I think she's agreeing with what you're saying about having, a level of de-escalation tactics, having a checklist of things that you go through, and having that, requirement. And I think too often in many states across this country, we see, to your point about, officers saying that they feared for their lives, our standard is sort of subjective, and we measure, did they really fear for their lives? Were they really afraid? Rather than having an objective standard that may, measure, okay, but were your actions reasonable? Was that fear of that Black man reasonable, or was it just, a reflection of your own biases, which is, unfortunate and inappropriate in this particular circumstance? So I think we see that, too often. And somebody else, it's way too far in the comments now, somebody else was mentioning that even if you get that chance to go in court, often Black people still don't get a fair shake. And I agree. I think, there are so many statistics and studies by the DOJ, by the FBI, by people that talk about how often Black people are convicted when you go to court, how we get longer sentences when we go. The number of exonerations that we have on the back end is filled with Black people, because too often we are wrongly accused, we're brought to court, we're improperly convicted, we get longer sentences. And so it's just this constant cycle of unfortunate circumstances. And I've read this, I'm gonna repost this on my personal page on my stories. But there's this thread on Twitter going around by this woman, Kryst Vernoff. Complex just reposted this on their page. And she's talking about all these crimes that she's committed. This is a white woman. All these crimes she's committed over the years, and how, police officers, when she does something, they laugh. Like she punched some guy in the face in front of a cop, and the cop walked over to her and he's like laughing. He's like, you're not supposed to do that in front of the cops. And, they just tell her to go home. Like, when on the other hand, you have somebody, a Black person who does the same thing, and may not be able to go home because they may have been shot and killed by the police, and all of that is wrong. And so she's pointing out the hypocrisy of this, and how there's this huge double standard between how white people are treated for not their crimes, but their mistakes, because she's like, when I did these things, we just called them mistakes. And versus, how Black people are treated for doing some of the same actions.
And I need to know if you shoot me that thread, because I'd actually love read through that. I've seen some other threads similar to it where people have talked about all the times they've been drunk behind the wheel of a car, or all the times that they were selling water, and all the moments where, they were doing something very similar to what other people have done, and they were not killed by the police. So it's one of those things where it really does, where we say we weaponized race, where a weapon at this point, where we're automatically not given the benefit of the doubt merely because we're Black, and merely because we're people of color. And I think that that's what makes it very scary walking out into the world, is knowing that there's already a chip on our shoulders alone, just for the way that we look. And I think that as we push forward, and as we think about all these instances, and people are really evaluating how they feel about Black Lives Matter, and about police brutality, and all these things, we really have to think about, what does it feel like for you to walk out in the world? Do you feel free? Do you feel like you're going to make it home tonight? I think that there is a level of inherent fear that we have as Black people, and that we have as people of color, that we automatically have to think about those things. We automatically have to think about encounters with the police. I was just driving, I'm in Hawaii right now. I was just driving down the street, and I saw a police officer under the bridge, and he was on his motorcycle, and he flicked his lights, and my heart started beating out of my chest, because I started thinking to myself, oh my gosh, is this guy about to pull me over? Should I pull out my camera? Should I this? Should I that? And, you know, it's this level of fear that we automatically have. I actually had a situation years ago when I was dating an ex-boyfriend of mine, and he was pulled over, and this was in Washington, D.C. And apparently he fit the description of someone that had stolen a car the morning before, and they put a shotgun to his head. And the fear in his voice and all of these things that we experienced in this moment, where he's literally trying to explain what is going on, literally trying to say, this is not me, this is my car, this is that. And it's like, well, we'll find out what happens. The other guy, his partner, goes back to the car, looks up the information, checks the tags. But you have a shotgun and unarmed. So it's one of those things where it's tiring, it's exhausting, and you're waiting for the day when it's going to change. And it's just a very limbo feeling where we're all very stagnant in our emotions, and we're just trying to look for the light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel just continues to get dark, and I'm just waiting for that moment. And I wish I had the answers to be able to give people faith and hope, but I'm just hoping that these conversations lead somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think that all these conversations are doing some important things in motivating not only us as individuals to take action, but also companies to take action. Not just against, you know, police brutality and racism, but also in support of important holidays like tomorrow. Tomorrow's JuneTeenth. And yes. I'm so excited that so many companies, including Endeavor, the company that owns the Miss Universe organization, has deemed this an official, you know, paid company holiday. And I think that's really important. So what are you doing to celebrate tomorrow?
I haven't got a thing planned.
Which is exactly what you should do on the holiday.
I don't have anything planned. I, you know, and this sounds really terrible coming from a Black woman, but I have never celebrated Juneteenth. This sounds so bad, and we're here to be honest with each other.
I think it's important.
The one time that I did, actually, I celebrated it 2 times when I was a teenager in Minnesota. There was a Juneteenth festival.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was really, 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 really nice. And even when I was 15 and 16, I had no idea what it was. It wasn't something that was taught when I was growing up in my high schools or middle schools or elementary schools. No one really knew what it was, but we knew that it was like the biggest Black festival in the state. So we would do it. But usually, and people can be like, oh, why wouldn't you celebrate it? I honestly don't celebrate much of any holiday. You guys will notice when you like go through my Instagram and you follow me on my stories, I don't really celebrate Christmas. Sometimes I celebrate Thanksgiving. I don't even celebrate my birthday half the time. I don't know what's wrong with me, but like holidays are just holidays. They're just, I don't even celebrate things. But I think that for me, I usually spend Juneteenth not necessarily as a celebration. I spend it as a moment to educate myself. I'm a movie fiend, so I usually like watch Roots, or I'll watch, there's a few other, I'll watch Mandingo is a really good movie that I like to watch. I also watch a few other movies like Selma, or 11 Years a Slave, 12 Years a Slave. So, you know, there's a list of movies that I go through and watch, because to me, it's a great day because it is a celebration of the freeing of the slaves. But I also think that it's a moment for us to kind of recognize that slavery ever existed, recognizing the fact that our ancestors at some point were in chains and on ships and all these things. And Amistad is another movie that I like to watch. And it's just one of those situations where it's a celebration, but it's also kind of disheartening in a way, because you think about all the work in the 400 years that was behind enslaving people that looked like me. And when I think about it, I want to be happy, but I'm also, you know, sad. And I always tell this to people that go through their emotions when it comes to talking about African-American history, when it talks about slavery, that everyone has to decide, and everyone has a right to experience it the way that they want to experience it. So I'm not telling anyone not to celebrate. I'm just saying that in my own mind and in my own heart, it's a great day, but it's also an eye-opening day.
Exactly.
And it's
an important day to continue learning. And, you know, like you said, you know, watching those movies, take a moment to read a book, take a moment to learn about what Juneteenth is.
Yeah.
and, you know, and help other people to understand that. So I'm seeing a lot of comments saying that Josh had a good question. I've missed Josh's question. So Josh, if you can re-add your question and drop it in the question box, I'll be able to see it, because a lot of comments just passed by. So we want to make sure that we get your question answered, because there are a lot of people saying that's an excellent question. Just drop it in the little question box.
I actually did. It's how can white people show respect / observance best tomorrow? What would speak volumes to you?
This is good. Well, I think it goes to what we just said, is, you know, educating yourself about what Juneteenth was and the history following Juneteenth. So to back up a little bit, for people who don't know what Juneteenth is, it is sort of the official day that we have chosen to celebrate the end of slavery. There's a lot of background to it, but in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation that President Abraham Lincoln wrote went into action January 1st, 1863. And basically what that said is all the enslaved people in the Confederate States are now free. Unfortunately, then the Civil War was still going on. And so for a number of reasons, maybe people didn't hear about the Emancipation Proclamation, or because the Confederacy wasn't actually enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation, there were enslaved people in a number of different states who remained enslaved. And so when the Confederate War ended in 1865, June of that year, one of the Union generals rode down to Galveston, Texas, and announced in Texas that the enslaved people were free. And that was on June 19th that he made that statement. Now, people still were enslaved even after that, because the 13th Amendment is actually what formally abolished slavery. That was ratified by the states in December of that year. And even after that, there were still a number of things that were happening to keep Black people from reaching equality. Things like Jim Crow laws, segregation, mass incarceration, things still happening today. So what you can do on Juneteenth to honor the holiday is learn about what we're talking about. Learn about, you know, what happened, how, you know, some of those just unfortunate and sad measures that were taken against Black people, like slavery and, you know, segregation laws, Jim Crow laws, how those have continued to challenge Black people unnecessarily, rather than figuring out measures that we can use to reverse, you know, the effects of slavery and segregation over the years. So I hope that you guys just spend the day learning and, you know, reading and looking online and watching documentaries on Juneteenth.
Yeah, do what I do, or y'all can go out and, you know, treat it as if it's a celebratory situation where you're bringing family and friends together. Being able to talk about the things that's going on in the world. I think that, like you said, educating yourself is so important. Everyone in general needs to be educating themselves. And I especially try to push that narrative, even outside of, you know, holidays and moments of history, historical days. It's so important for us to always be challenging ourselves to learn a little bit more about the things that are happening within this country and throughout the world. I actually have, and I want everyone, I'm going to go ahead and put in my little plug, everyone to go ahead and follow Service Women's Action Network, the nonprofit.
Yes.
We're actually doing a movie challenge where there are like Netflix movies, specifically some for LGBTQ for Pride Month, and then some for anti-racism movies, where we're challenging people to go through and watch these movies and to educate themselves, take notes, and then come back to us and tell us what they thought, how they felt, and do they feel like they had a moment or a revelation, or they've learned something new, and all these things. And I think that everyone, especially organizations, need to go through and challenge their communities. I think that as we talk about the impacts of these movements, we also have to allow our own isolated pockets of space, mostly organizations and like you said, Endeavor and all these places. We have to challenge our communities and the people that we're in direct contact with to be better and to be better and to educate ourselves. And we have to do it in a joint effort. Then let's do it jointly, because I think that the change, oftentimes people think that change starts on this huge, broad, expanded level, and it's just not true. Most of the times we can't get to some spaces, so we have to be able to impact the spaces that we occupy. And I think that that's what I'm doing within SWAN, although they already had their own great amount of great things going on when it comes to racial injustice and discrimination and all these things. I'm just, you know, just stepping and acting like I'm doing all the stuff. They're already doing these things before me. But it's just like I said, let's work on impacting our own pockets of space. So we don't have access to the country, and we don't have access to being able to make a footprint nationally. But we can impact our town, our one community, our one organization, our one corporate space. We can do that. We can also impact our families as well, because there are a lot of families right now that have their own level of divisiveness happening, mostly because there's a difference in opinion. So we have to work on making sure that we're impacting our space before we attempt to step in.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's valuable because I think people are typically influenced mostly by the people in their own circles, not necessarily by like public figures or commercials that they see. It's just about, you know, having a friend talk to you about their actual views, or having a friend educate you about something that they've learned about. That helps the most. I mean, if we could all help one or two people, this movement would go so much quicker if all of us took the time to actually do that. Now, you mentioned the Service Women Action Network, and I know that, you know, during our last live, we definitely wanted to talk about some of the things that you've been doing after you gave up your crown and crowned Kyra McCullough. And so one of the things that I'd love to talk about is, you know, your advocacy while you were Miss USA and how you carried that into your work after being Miss USA. So can you talk about, you know, connecting those two?
Yeah, you know, I think that advocacy is so important, and, you know, it's something that I've maintained over the years, coming from a military family. Myself, my mother, my dad, my sister, my brother, and my stepmother, all Army veterans. Awesome. And I've seen the direct effect of those that are serving in the military, and having been in for almost 10 years now, or longer if we talk about the contract, that'll be about 13 years. But I've seen the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen the effects of mental employment. I've seen the effects of overall trauma. What is that?
Sorry, that's hard. Say hi to Susie.
Oh.
Hi, I'm so sorry, you guys. My food is down.
I love you. You're so amazing.
Good to see you.
So FYI, y'all, Deshauna knows this, but for those who have not lived in the Miss USA apartment, whenever we get a delivery of like food, the desk calls us to come down and get it, because Uber Eats doesn't come to your door here anymore. So that's our phone ringing. Sorry, it was ringing. I was like, I wonder if they can hear that.
Oh my gosh. I was looking around like, what is in my house? Is it like buzzing or something?
Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. Okay.
Oh,
okay, go ahead.
I love her. Oh my gosh. She's awesome. What was my train of thought? What was I saying?
You were talking about all the service people who are in your family, how long you served.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Family. So mainly I was just talking about advocacy and the fact that, you know, impacting the military and military families has been super important to me in my entire life, because I'm affected by it. So when I was Miss USA, my focus was on post-traumatic stress disorder. My focus was on impacting the people that come home from deployment. My focus was on the 22 soldiers or veterans that commit suicide a day. It was basically on raising awareness and making sure that people were able to catch the signs, especially for veterans that are returning from service. That we have to be able to monitor them, not be overbearing, but, you know, keep an eye out, because mental illness is something that is very prevalent within the military. So as I transitioned to, I think we talked about just previously on our previous live, where I was like, as I was making my transition, I spent the past 2-3 years speaking. I started feeling like I wasn't living in my purpose. So, you know, and we talked about it just a smidge, where I talked about how I applied to be a CEO of Service Women's Action Network. Didn't think it was going to happen. They hired me anyway, because apparently I'm kind of cool. And, you know,
you're lit, Deshauna.
And now, you know, as an organization, our entire focus is on making the military a safe space for women in particular. We found that statistically, and going through all the resources that the military provides, that very rarely is it specific to women, even when it comes to access to birth control or access to reproductive products, when it comes to like IVFs and stuff like that. We've noticed that the military doesn't really have anything in place that is specific to women. Most of the infrastructure is based in men, mostly because they represent about 80% of the force. So that other 20% is obviously not a huge priority for us or for the military in general. So we started putting into place the organization 11 years ago when it was founded, being able to find organizations that have resources that are specific to women, whether it comes to education, it comes to homelessness, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to reproduction, when it comes to birth control, all these things, so that the women within the force and after they leave the military, it's a simple one-stop shop where you can call us and we have a whole list of resources that are available to you, oftentimes free, that are available to you in case you need something that the military is unable to provide you. And then also we do a lot of things on Capitol Hill when it comes to providing bills and legislation that's based in evening the playing fields of military women that are trying to make their moves up the ranks. We were actually one of the founding members of the legislation that was passed opening all combat arms positions to women, and which happens to have been my on-stage question when I won Miss USA, my top 5 question. And just come to find out, I'm the CEO of the organization that was one of the biggest pushes behind that legislation years ago. So it's just very interesting, the dynamic and the coincidence behind those two things.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of your top 5 question, how did it feel when you were asked that question on stage? Were you like, oh, yes, I can talk about this? Or were you like, oh, my God, let me make sure I get this right when I'm saying it?
You know, I felt great. I was like, I say this when they did this, that little recap video of me. I had my little fro out and I flew to New York. This Miss Universe organization had me do like this recap video where I watched the whole competition and I just did my own commentary, which is always super fun. And I just remember in that moment, like, I'm really about to be G.I. Jane Demi Moore on stage, because I was all for, you know, what can I do to talk about the military? What can I do to be able to make sure that everyone understands this is my platform and that this is cool, this is great, this is
it is.
Changes the mood of the competition of what we see on a normal basis each year. And I think that that's what's so great about pushing girls to bring their lives to the stage.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people are so afraid of pulling this card or pulling that card or talking about their experiences. And I don't understand that. Our experiences is what makes us who we are. So, you know, in that moment, I wanted to be very women power-ish and do everything that I can to not only be bold in the things that I'm saying, and but to make every female feel powerful in that moment, to feel like we're capable of doing anything. And I felt like this is like a great moment to be able to tackle that. And in that moment, I just felt very blessed to receive the question, because it's so relative to who I am. So I felt great. Everyone else was like, oh.
And you could tell when you were answering the question, because like you took a pause, you were like, as a captain in the military, and then smiled like, you're welcome. And I remember being at home and I was like, say all of the things, tell the people. Yeah. So it was a great moment. It was a great moment to watch, and I'm glad that like internally you were thinking the same, that you were like, yes, this is a good moment.
Thank you. It was a great moment. It felt good. It felt good.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I want to talk about, you know, we talked about your advocacy while you were Miss USA and afterwards. One of the things I think, you know, many title holders even think about is talking about their advocacy, even when it may be a polarizing issue. And now Black Lives Matter, I personally don't think is a polarizing issue nowadays, but I know when it started, it was. Like, people were really worried about saying Black Lives Matter. And, you know, a lot of people were calling it a hate group and people didn't understand. Whereas I feel like nowadays the sort of tide is reversed in that most people understand and support Black Lives Matter. And there's a minority of people who shout, you know, all lives matter, because they genuinely don't understand what Black Lives Matter is about. So when you were a title holder, and even now when you think about title holders, you know, advocating for sometimes polarizing issues, is that something that worried you and worries you when you see that in title holders today?
It doesn't worry me now, but back then, and I'm not saying it was that long ago, but it was definitely around the time when the Black Lives Matter movement was very misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't dare have said Black Lives Matter in 2016 and 17. And that's really sad to say.
But it's true. I think all of us were. I didn't want my law firm to see me saying it, because I was like, they might think the wrong thing about this.
And that's what's so great about seeing the way that the world has evolved, that pageantry has evolved, title holders, advocacy, and philanthropy has evolved, is that now you can actually say the statement. Back then, you know, I think Eric Garner was the situation that happened back then during
it was 2016,
Yeah, I think that was Eric Garner that year. And I think I posted something on the Miss USA platform, but I would not dare post Black Lives Matter because it was such a controversial statement. It would have probably hit every news outlet. Oh my gosh, Miss USA is saying Black Lives Matter. No. Where it was one of those things where you wanted to, but you couldn't. It was just so like outrageous.
Yeah, it was like really controversial and polarizing. And it was sad to see because, like, you know, the essence of the statement is just like, we matter. It's like that comedian who was like, you know, this is like the start of negotiations, just that Black Lives Matter. Not like, you know, that we deserve empathy or equality, literally just that we matter.
Yeah. It's sad. It's so sad. And I look back on it now and I envy you in this space because you're able to be so vocal with with racial discussion, which is something that we kind of tapped on a little bit in 2016, but I had to tap lightly. I had to do very subliminal and light statements, but make bold statements in their own way. And I think that that's why wearing my afro as my final walk was a way of me to be able to talk about my Blackness. And it was something that my mom wanted so badly when she was living, which is, Deshauna, I want you to not be afraid of your Blackness and not be afraid of being proud of it, to not shut it away based on the feelings of other people. And I think that that was my own subliminal way and my own subtle way of raising the fist and being able to say that I'm so proud of who I am and what I represent. I'm not going to hide under extensions and straight hair anymore. I'm going to show who I am as a Black Miss USA. And I think that as we transition and I see title holders being able to take a stand, I love it because it was all in its purpose. It was all planned. We all knew that this day would come. And I know that even if we go back to, you know, the former Miss USAs, and you have the ones like the Carol Gist, I'm sure that she's looking at this moment as the first Black Miss USA. She's looking at this moment as, wow, look at every stepping stone that we've placed so that the next queen can be bolder and louder and more true to herself. You know, I saw this moment. I didn't see it happening for a while, but I knew that there would come a moment where queens can really truly live in their truth. And I know that not even just women of color, but also as we even transition into, and I'm not going to talk for this for too long because I know this isn't the purpose of this
no, it absolutely is, yeah.
As we transition into the LGBTQ queens, as we transition into transgender queens, as we transition into queens of all body types, all heights, all sizes, as we transition, this is all in its purpose and it's all in its plan of pageantry to be inclusive. And for our world to be inclusive, all religions. I want to make it to that. I hope I'm alive to see it. So where not only in pageantry, we are tolerant, but on Capitol Hill, we're tolerant when it comes to the amount of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. We are tolerant. I look forward to the day where everyone can set their own stepping stone for the next person behind them. That is the purpose. And, you know, I think about that moment and some people saw it as, whoa, this is amazing. And other people saw it as me, you know, but it was intentional.
It was important. It was important. And I think, you know, I think pageants are constantly a reflection of the times, because I don't think that was just that you feeling or me even during the same time feeling like we couldn't talk about Black Lives Matter was relegated just to pageantry. I think it spanned all industries. Like, as an attorney, I was like, oh my God, I bought a Black Lawyers Matter sweatshirt. I think it was in 2016. I remember posting on my Instagram in 2017, and later hid the story. Not the story, the post. I put it in my archives because I thought, I'm about to start, practicing as an attorney. I don't want my law firm to see this and worry about, having this radical person associated with this hate group, as people would call it, even though it's not. And so I do think that it was a reflection of what was happening in that day and age. And I think what we're seeing with this new generation, Gen Z, and even younger millennials, is that we are so socially conscious. Like Gen Zs especially value the companies that they work for being socially conscious. And so because of that, we're seeing this new day and age where everyone is talking about social issues. And if you're not, you're in the minority and you're part of this slow moving, conservative piece of America that hasn't caught up to the modern day and age, which I think is a great thing.
I think it is a great thing. And I think it's a place where we can all feel comfortable. And even like you and Zozie, I think y'all were in Times Square and you held up your black fist and you guys were wearing all black. I was like, oh my gosh, times have changed.
Right. And not only for us to post that, for Miss USA and the Miss Universe official accounts to repost it. I was like, look at this.
To repost on those accounts, I'm like, the world is changing. And it does show this generational change, and that it does, we can, apply it to the times that, there's going to come a day where, like, minority versus majority, Black people will occupy, and people of all shades, people of all religions, people of all backgrounds will occupy every space. And it won't be this like, whoa. I actually look forward to that day where it's so common for diversity. It's so common to be understanding of social issues and racial injustice. I look forward to the day where it's not taboo, where moments aren't so iconic because it's a normal part of the day. Therefore, we're not so conditioned to be so celebratory of these moments. I look forward to the day. I don't think I'll be alive, might be my kids, but I do look forward to the day where this happens. But I'm like basking in this moment of looking at these young people and generations stepping up and even, telling to their parents, you all did it wrong. You did it wrong. And now we're fixing it. We lived in a time where this was acceptable, but we're not accepting it. We're not allowing it. I'm not going to allow you to have those conversations around me. I don't know how you were raised, but I know how I'm about to raise myself. I've seen so many videos of young people of all shades that are literally saying to their parents, "You're wrong."
Yes, I've seen the same, especially on TikTok, all over the place.
All over the place. And I think that it's great. And what you're saying right now with Gen Z and millennials and all these people to come behind them, to be able to step up and say, you know what? We're not going to go back to where we started. This isn't the 60s or the 70s or the 50s. This is literally going to be 2020. And as we continue to push forward in society, we have every intention on making sure that everyone is placed on an equal playing field, and that we don't have to worry about police brutality and social and racial injustice. And I look forward to that day. And I think that as we continue to push people within our communities to demand this, we are going to be in a place where our kids don't have to worry about these arguments or these fights. And I think that's the responsibility of queens like yourself, the responsibility of CEOs like myself, the responsibility of everyone in this generation to say, what can I do so that the person behind me does not have to deal with this? If I have to go through the fight, what is it that I need to do to place a stepping stone so the person behind me has an easier chance?
And so that there will be a person behind you. Because I was reading today, and I think this is true, because I was reading a few different articles and having a conversation with somebody about the number of Black photographers who have shot covers for Vogue magazine. Because recently there was a memo where Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief, is talking about, the lack of Black creatives. And the first person to shoot, the first Black photographer, was in 2018 because Beyonce, when she was shooting her cover, the Queen, demanded that she have a Black photographer. And so that was the first time that Vogue had a Black photographer. And I read today that there has not been a Black photographer to shoot a cover of Vogue since then. And so that is so unfortunate. And it's one of those things that we constantly have to work for, not even just being first and having these, huge milestone first, but that we constantly have to make sure that somebody comes behind us. Because if we don't sometimes there just won't be another one.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think it's also one of those things where, and we talked about this when we were texting yesterday, where people say, well, what can I do to be able to make our spaces more inclusive? It's demanding inclusiveness of these large scale organizations and corporations, Fortune 500 companies and magazines like Vogue. You know, I'm the type where I'm gonna boycott you. I'm gonna never purchase. I'm never gonna watch. I'm never going to even look your direction if I do not have proof that you are inclusive within your organization. So as we, you know, I was quick never to have a white chocolate mocha from Starbucks again, venti. I was very close, because when I saw that
the news
can't wear,
tell about the news, Deshauna.
Well, I was about to lose my white chocolate mocha. Okay,
I was about to do the same.
Yes, and okay, they came back. And they said that, okay, no, we changed our minds. I get it, but now I don't know yet. I might have to go over to Dunkin' or somebody else. I have to think about it, because I am very quick to boycott. I'm very quick to never purchase again. And I think that that's one of those things that we can do, just even on our smallest scale, is not give these places our money. Like, why are we giving these places our money? What have they done to deserve it? We are making a lot of people around the world rich. What are they doing to deserve our pockets? And we have to think about that. And Starbucks, if you're watching, you're on a question mark right now. I don't know yet. I have to think about it. But there are other organizations like Vogue. I'm not really, you know, I don't have a subscription with them.
Me neither.
There's other places. I think who else did I recently stopped working with? Ben and Jerry's I always love. I've always been a fan of Ben and Jerry's.
Yo, Ben and Jerry's?
Ben and Jerry's.
Okay, y'all. So a little bit of background if you haven't heard about Starbucks and Ben and Jerry's. So recently there was a story that came out that said that Starbucks was restricting its employees from wearing pins or other memorabilia that said Black Lives Matter or spoke to the movement. And then later there was some sort of clarification / change of direction where they were saying, actually, they can wear Black Lives Matter stuff. They can only wear stuff that we actually provide, which seemed like either they were reversing what they said initially and just trying to fix it, or that they weren't clear on their initial stance. Not sure, haven't read enough articles, but that's generally what's been happening with Starbucks. But Ben and Jerry's, y'all? The two founders of Ben and Jerry's, I think, were arrested at a protest a couple of weeks ago.
That was actually a picture from a few years ago where they were arrested. So I'm
really?
They were getting arrested when it wasn't cool, when it wasn't like a part of the trend. Yeah, that was an old photo. Yeah. Yes,
they've been doing this. The stuff that I've seen about Ben and Jerry's has been incredible. Just Google Ben and Jerry's, like the people that they hire, some of their ice cream flavors that they'll like change the name of depending on what's happening. I mean, they're incredible advocates. So I agree. You know, when I go and buy ice cream, I'm like, do you have Ben and Jerry's? Like, I just, it gives me something. It feeds me. So it's like these brands that are supportive of Black Lives Matter and Black people, but also Black owned brands. Like just last week, our current stylist, Emma Pritchard, started posting some of the Black owned brands that we've been working with. And one of them was Shop Silhouette. And I was like, oh, you're right. So I literally went online just then. I was like, I like their stuff. I was on a shopping spree. I was like, you know what? Let me shop on Shop Silhouette. So just being aware of those things and making sure that you can support them is so important.
It is. And we have to, the focus is on evening the playing field of the minorities. And the best thing to do that is to support minority brands. And I know Olivia Jordan she just put a question. Any suggestions on causes to donate to? Speaking of where to put our money, definitely on where to put your money is definitely going to be into minority brands. So, you know, the first thing that I do when I think of even makeup and stuff like that, I start thinking, okay, I want a nice little lipstick in a cherry red color. First, let me see if there's a Black owned business that sells this color. So the first thing that I do with almost everything that I go through and purchase, and it's a little bit harder here in Hawaii because it's hard shipping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But everything that I do is by taking the first step of understanding, is there an alternative versus the bigger brands? Is there an alternative? Because we want to even the playing field. A lot of what happens when it comes to injustice is based in poverty. It's based in places that are lower income spaces. I know that people were talking about police brutality and things along those lines, but it just comes in injustice in general is impacted a little bit more by those that are struggling, right? So the way to even the playing field a lot of the times, especially for Black people, is starting with how can we make ourselves financially advance our communities. It always starts with that, because if you have the money, then you have the money for the lawyer, then you have the money for the business, you have the money for dealing with health issues, you have the money to buy better food. All of it translates, in my opinion, into money. All of it has to do with having the finances to be able to pull ourselves out of some of these spaces. And then also, you know, and I always say this to people, it also comes down to voting. Not everyone deserves your vote. Yep. Oftentimes we go and we vote just associated with a specific party, or we go voting based on what the person looks like, their skin color. And oftentimes you really have to look through what plans they have in place and ask specific questions. What are you doing to be able to impact racial injustice in the community that I'm voting for you to lead? Exactly. And if they don't have a plan, they don't deserve your vote. We have to be very, 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 very specific and intentional voting for it. Yeah, and intentional, because that also goes down to that affects the district attorney, that affects the judges in that area, that affects all these like legislative things, and that affects all these pieces that impact whether or not, even then, if police officers are being held accountable. Sometimes it comes down to the district attorney. Did you vote for the district attorney? Do you know who did? Those are all those questions that we have to start asking ourselves, is what have we done to contribute the community that is oppressing us? What have we done? Or have we done nothing? Have we never been to the poll at all when it comes to the local level?
Oh yeah, because the stats I saw recently, somebody was posting the number of Black people in each state that did not vote in the presidential election in 2016. I mean, was just jaw-dropping. And so just making sure that you get out there, register. Like I've been posting, I probably will keep reposting the little badge that Instagram has where it says register to vote, because it makes it so easy. You literally just click it and choose your state, and it's like, okay, here's the website, register to vote, bring a friend. And so, yeah, I think doing all of those is incredibly important. And so, okay, I know we're running out of time here. We have 8 minutes left.
Okay.
And when we talked about this initially, I know it's like, girl, yes.
We do it every time.
Right. When we talked about this live initially, we wanted to make sure that we provided some time for you to give some advice to title holders about, you know, their advocacy and what's happening, and also to people who want to join the movement. And so, guys, if you have specific questions, drop them in the question box down below. I end up missing a lot of the comments here. But first, Deshauna, so what advice do you have for title holders? I know we talked about this a little bit, but, you know, title holders who are afraid to speak out, or who just don't think it's a responsibility to speak out on every social issue.
So what I would say to title holders, because a lot of the times their fear of speaking out is based in whether or not, oh, I may not win Miss USA, I may not win. What if they see this and they don't like it? It's very important to look at Cheslie and to look at Zosie and to look at Kaliegh and to be able to see the fact that they're being vocal and they are the current title holders, which means that being vocal is okay. We have to start with that. Some people are literally afraid to speak out because they think that, oh my gosh, if I speak out, I'm definitely not going to place at the national level or the international level. Let's go ahead and wipe that away. The organization, MUO, is not going to discriminate against you because you said Black Lives Matter on your page. Okay?
Especially because we put Black Lives Matter on our pages.
Right. Especially if they have Black Lives Matter on their page.
On Front Street.
Right. So it's like you have to look at the upper echelon and say, okay, is this something that's socially acceptable? Is it something it is? So don't be afraid to speak out. Secondly, sometimes, if we're being real, there are some people, directors at the franchise level, that are telling people not to speak out, that aren't speaking out themselves. You are the current title holder, and you have the right to be able to voice the things that you care about, okay? Now, it might ruffle some feathers, but staying true to yourself is the reason why these organizations crowned you. We have to think about the source. They picked you, and they picked the things that come with you, and that means that your passions and your advocacies and your philanthropies, all those things come with you as a title holder. Yep. And you do yourself a huge disservice not to use this time as a title holder to be able to speak on the things that you care about. So speak on the things that you care about, and don't be afraid. No matter what feathers it ruffles, push forward, because you don't want to deal with regret. My favorite quotes: do not fear failure, be terrified of regret. You will feel a whole level of regret this entire year, not saying anything, knowing that it's something that you wanted to do.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Especially not even just knowing that it's something that you wanted to do, but knowing that you were placed in an important position and had a platform and didn't use it when it could have been used for something incredibly beneficial to other people. So we got this question from CJDA3, who said, do you believe the Black Lives Matter movement will have an effect on our 2020 elections? I would say absolutely. I'm trying to exit out this question so we can see you. I would say absolutely. I think, especially given how many brands and people have spoken out about it, how many people support it, I think it's another issue that people are going to have in the front of their minds when they're walking to the polls. Where you stand on Black Lives Matter, how you have supported equality in this country, how you have helped us to break down police brutality and systemic racism in our country. So absolutely, I think so. What do you think, Shauna?
I agree completely. I definitely think that anything that takes place in general within this country that hits like a national argument or a national discussion is going to affect people's positioning when they go to the polls.
Exactly. And I think it should, because, it's an important issue. Just like people, ask candidates how they feel about environmental issues in this country. Yeah. Just how people ask about, voting or LGBTQ issues. This is an important issue that we need to know how our leaders stand on so that we can figure out who to support. I mean, just like you were saying, like when you're voting for your DA, when you're voting for your mayor, when you're voting for your chief of police, when you're voting for your governor, who in some states governors appoint the judges who will actually be reviewing your case, whereas in other states, judges are voted for by the public at large. So understanding, how things work, in your community is essential. Okay, so I see we have 3 minutes left. We're going to get kicked off at an hour. So, seriously, Deshauna, I just have to say thank you. Thank you for blessing us with your candid, well-informed opinion, because it is exactly what we need to hear, especially from someone that we all respect so much and someone who is so accomplished and successful. Thank you for spending this time with us and for just sharing your knowledge and experience. It really is important.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm sending love to you and Zosie in New York and Paula and the whole team, and just keep up the good work. A lot of us formers especially are loving everything that's happening within this organization, loving how vocal you're being right now. This is very much necessary, and it's everything the organization stands for. So just thank you for what you all are doing. I'm always here if you need me.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon again, I'm sure.
All right, love.
All right, see ya. Guys, seriously, Deshauna is royalty. Like, every time I talk to her, I just want to sit there like in awe. Like, sometimes I'll forget to ask a follow-up question because I'll be like, yeah, talk, say the things. It's incredible. So seriously, y'all, thanks again to Deshauna for coming on today. Like I said, she's incredible. And, I'm just so glad that we both represent in an organization, the Miss Universe organization, that's continued to support us speaking out about these issues, because it's not just Zosie and I and Kaliegh that have prompted these discussions. It's people within the organization, and I'm just thrilled that we have their support and your support as well. So thanks y'all for watching. We've got another live planned for Tuesday. It's going to be incredible, so make sure you tune in. We'll be posting who's going to be there and times and everything, so stay tuned. I'll see you guys soon.